Boss knew.
I've collected a nice helping of boiled water for the 4 of us to share, Billet said, lugging over 2 hefty barrels. I admit, I indulged already. 4 of us? Boss knew asked. The 2 oxen and the 2 of us, Billet said, patting the head and rubbing the ears of one of the oxen. I am beyond grateful that your animals have carried my supplies halfway across the realm. It's the least I can do to hydrate them through the second stretch of Devor. Boss lugged one of the barrels over to his first ox to let it drink. Billet scooped water out of the other barrel for himself, and then offered, Here, have a swig. I'll drink after them. I've got to ensure they're taken care of first. Boss New consoled his neglected ox until half a barrel had emptied, and then shifted the barrel so that the other could drink. Billet smiled and shook his head at him. I suppose if my tools needed watering, I'd give them a drink before myself too. Luckily, they drink metal rather than water, and I can be selfish in hydrating myself. Boss New laughed at the jest, but still watched over his ox to ensure it finished drinking the allotted portion. Once she had finished, Billet offered the barrel again. Boss New heartily accepted. You were too kind, Billet. As Boss New was about to scoop the first handful to his mouth, a soldier stumbled over to his cart, gripping at his stomach.
Is Basil around? I need herbs.
Boss New let the water slip through his hands back into the barrel to unbury Basil's storage containers from underneath the soldiers' tents and other supplies. Billet slurped the water loudly, teasing his traveling companion. Boss New glared at the blacksmith for a moment before returning his gaze to the herb supplies. The man outside the cart doubled over in pain. You're all right, you're fine, Billet said. If you need to retch, we can move you into the woods. Well, the herbs are ready when Basil arrives. Boss New searched around the campsite for the young mage. The stranger groaned. You sound like you're one bowel movement away from feeling better. Billet then twitched in discomfort. Do you know what you need? I don't see Basil anywhere. Boss New dreaded as additional men stumbled over to his cart in search of Basil. Among the approaching mob were the priests and priestess. Something's going on around camp. Billet stood and stretched out his muscles. Are you all right? Boss New asked. Yes, Billet said with a cross expression. He grasped at his throat, like many of the others gathering in front of the cart were.
We need herbs,
Creed demanded, clawing his way into the cart. Creed, you don't even know what would help, Faith said. Creed opened Basil's containers and started eating whatever he could shove into his mouth. Leave some for everyone else, Ethic objected. Please get down from my cart. I'm responsible for safeguarding those wares, Boss New called. He scanned the campsite for any sight of Basil or watercress, but all he observed were dozens upon dozens of squirming bronze soldiers. Another soldier tried to climb into the cart, but Creed kicked him down. Creed! Ethic gaped in horror. Faith helped to sit the kicked man upright, but he was unresponsive. One soldier wearing Khazarish ribbons arrived at the cart. Master Watercress said that if you need to feel better, drink more water. He's been saying that the rations were salted using the riverbank's salt and dehydrated everyone to the point of illness. Thank goodness that Master Watercress provided direction. Creed scrambled down from the cart and pushed his way to the Khazarish soldier, giving instructions. The soldier held out water skins, and Creed snatched the first one from his hand. He drank deeply before finally passing it off to Ethic. Ethic passed it on to Faith, who passed it to the nearest sickly soldier without drinking from it. The pair stared at Creed as they did so. Once the Khazarish water inspector distributed the water skins, everyone eagerly drank. Billet also shared around the barrel to the others, sending Boss New an apologetic glance. You, have you had your fill? The Khazarish soldier asked Boss New. He hadn't felt unwell yet, but he wouldn't take the water away from those who needed it. Yes, I have, he lied. Good. The soldier moved on with the water skins in hand. Billet clutched at his stomach tighter. Wails arose from all over, and Boss New fretted over his friend and the others. Creed dropped to the ground, unconscious. Though stumbling and clutching at their sides, Faith and Ethic helped to prop up his body next to the man he had kicked. Faith fell to her forearms with a crunch of her frail bones. Ethic tried to aid her, but he couldn't stabilize himself. Just as Boss New moved to tend her, his beasts started making a ruckus, and he filled with dread. They stamped their hooves, and Boss New hopped out of the rocking cart to check on them. Feeling their sides, their stomachs gurgled irritably. Are they all right? Billet asked. We can't get by without them. Writhing, the blacksmith collapsed next to the others. I'm not feeling any better, a stranger cried. My muscles are killing me, Ethic complained. Faith stared unresponsively at the wheel of the cart. Does anyone know what herbs treat stomach aches or general pain? Bosnu asked the crowd. He recognized then that the entirety of the crusade suffered from the same ailment, yet he didn't know what to do. Find the mages, Billet pleaded, wrapping in a tight ball. Right. He looked for an opening, but there was no clear path to get through. His oxen kicked up more of a fuss, and one collapsed onto its knees, while the other bucked angrily. He tried to calm the riled one, but he took a hoof to the temple instead. Dazed, he stumbled backward and crumpled to the ground. When Bosnu came to, the screams had silenced. His precious oxen lay before him, dead. To their side, Billet, the faith leaders, and the soldiers seeking aid were also lifeless. A sob rose in Bosnu's throat, but he silenced it as soon as he witnessed men stabbing the corpses and collecting their heads. He crawled back into the forest with nothing but the clothes on his back and his gem pouch. Once far enough into the underbrush, he ran. He didn't know what he ran from or to, but he kept going until he returned to the merchant road without fear of being seen. Bosnu survived a week in Athlia before his gem ran dry. Do you have any work? He asked repeatedly to the merchants in the marketplace. Sometimes they would, and sometimes they wouldn't. But if they had work, it wasn't for anything he knew how to do. All his knowledge centered on how to care for oxen, prices to charge for transporting goods, and rates to pay for accompanying a trading caravan for their weather and healing services. He knew nothing of salesmanship, and he hadn't enough gem to purchase another ox or cart. He tried his hand at a few tasks, but his fellow merchants became frustrated with him quickly and would not hire him again. Occasionally, they would turn him away once he said his name. It didn't fit into their standard convention, and it turned off a few potential employers. After another few days, he found himself starving on a street corner. The city folk would toss him a few coins or a small shard, but in a day, it was never enough for a full meal. When word spread that he had survived the Crusade massacre, a few paid to hear his story, but he had missed most of the slaughter, and that was what people cared to hear about. Within the week, it was old news. He knew he needed to move to a more affordable city, but he was trapped within the safety of the weather and healing mage's barriers. Even when large, protected merchant caravans passed through Athlia, he couldn't afford their fee to travel with them. He couldn't afford passage aboard the ferry either. It would be suicide to travel through the Devor without at least a weather mage, but the longer Bosnu suffered from hunger, the more he considered it. There were times when he wished he had died with Billet and his beasts. On one such morning, he set back out towards Gia, knowing he'd become poisoned by the toxic atmosphere of Devor long before he reached Gial. The irony that he escaped one poisoning for the destiny of another was not lost on him. Just as he was about to head out on his lethal journey, a man garbed in black approached him and asked, "How would you like a second chance at life?"